The wind that morning carried the scent of lilac and rain across the empty plains. It whispered through the fence posts, stirred the curtains of a lonely house, and brushed against the calloused hands of Elias McGraw. He stood on the porch with his hat low, eyes tracing the horizon where the sun climbed slow and merciless. The ranch stretched wide and quiet beneath him, barn leaning slightly to the west, windmill groaning, a field of yellowed grass that used to be green when she was alive. They told him his wife died years ago, lost in a canyon flood when the wagon overturned. He'd buried what little they found, and beside that grave, he buried the man he used to be. Some nights, when the sky looked too much like the one from that day, he'd sit on the porch with his lantern lit, speaking softly to the dark. "Clara," he'd say, "you still out there, girl?" But no one ever answered. Only the coyotes, howling like broken promises in the distance. The days passed without edges, one folding into another like the creases in an old shirt. Elias fixed fences, tended cattle, and cooked beans for one. The house was too neat, too quiet, too empty. Even the rocking chair beside his stayed still. In town, folks pitied him at first. Then, when he didn't break, they simply stopped asking about him at all. Only Nora Finch, the innkeeper, still waved from her porch when he rode by, her apron fluttering in the wind. "Morning, Elias," she'd call, her tone somewhere between kindness and pity. He'd tip his hat, eyes down. He didn't much care for people seeing how lonely he'd become. The world had moved on without him. He worked, ate, slept, and prayed. And sometimes when he closed his eyes, he could still see her face, sunburned, laughing, leaning out from a wagon seat to hand him an apple. Then one morning, the sound of small hooves broke the silence. Two girls came riding into town on a tired mule, skirts muddied, faces streaked with dust. They couldn't have been older than 8. Townfolk watched from doorways as the children slid off the animal, clutching a worn satchel between them. Their voices carried soft and careful. "Excuse me, ma'am," one said to Nora Finch. "Can you tell us where Mr. Elias McGraw lives?" Nora frowned, wiping her hands on her apron. "You mean the rancher out by Dry Creek?" Both girls nodded. "Mama said that's where our daddy lives." The words hit like thunder. By noon, half the town had heard. "Elias McGraw's ghost wife's got children," someone whispered by the mercantile. "Says he's their daddy," barked another. The talk spread like prairie fire, everyone with a theory, a memory, or a judgment. But gossip has wings, and by sunset, it reached the ranch. Elias was mending a gate when old Sheriff Dillard rode up. "Got some news, Eli," the sheriff said, scratching his beard. "Two girls came into town today looking for their pa. Said their mama's name was Clara." Elias froze, his hand gripping the post so tight his knuckles went white. "That's a cruel joke, Tom." The sheriff's eyes softened. "I thought so too, till I saw their eyes." That night the ranch sat under a full moon, silver and still. Elias tried to sleep, but dreams dragged him back to the canyon. The overturned wagon, the sound of rushing water, her scream swallowed by the dark. He woke before dawn, sweating, heart beating like thunder in his chest. By the time he stepped out onto the porch, 2 figures were walking up the dirt road. They stopped at the gate, 2 little girls with long braids, wearing dresses too big for them. One held a faded photograph. The other clutched a ragged doll. "Mr. McGraw?" the taller one asked, her voice small but steady. Elias nodded, though his throat had gone dry. "Then we're your girls," the smaller said, lifting her chin with pride that only a child could muster. He stared at them, at their pale eyes, at the freckles that dusted their cheeks, at the curve of their smiles. It was like looking into the past. His hands shook as he reached for the photograph. It was him and Clara, taken the week before the canyon trip. The edges were worn, the image faint, but her face was clear. He fell to his knees right there in the dust. "Where's your mother?" he whispered. "She's nearby," said one of the twins. "Mama said to find you first. She said she'd come when she's strong enough to ride." Elias's breath caught. He didn't even wait for the girls to finish. He saddled his horse, left the door wide open, and rode hard toward town, heart hammering in his chest like a prayer that dared to hope again. The sheriff pointed him toward the creek just outside of Dry Creek Crossing. "She's camped down there," he said. Looks half-starved. Be gentle. Elias rode through the last of the sunlight, his mind a blur of disbelief and memory. When he reached the creek, he saw a small fire burning low, and a figure wrapped in a faded shawl. She turned when she heard the hooves. Elias, she said, her voice breaking. It was her, older, thinner, a shadow of the woman he buried. But her eyes were the same. He slid from the horse but couldn't move closer, afraid she'd vanish if he did. She stepped toward him first, tears already falling. I tried to come back sooner, she whispered. The flood took the wagon. I woke up days later with a broken leg. Some wagon train found me. By the time I could walk again, I was carrying the girls. Elias closed the distance, cupping her face with both hands. Her skin was cold as the creek water, her hair streaked with gray. But she was real. They said you died, he murmured. I almost did. The silence between them filled with years, lost birthdays, sleepless nights, the ache of 2 lives spent waiting. The stars blinked on above them, the fire crackling low. He wanted to hold her, but she turned away. You have your life now, she said softly. Your land, your peace. I'd only bring the past with me. I can't stay, Elias. Clara, he started, but she shook her head. I just wanted you to know. Wanted them to see your face, so they'd know their father's kind. She walked back toward the shadows, the hem of her dress brushing through the grass. He stood there, fists trembling, unable to speak. The night swallowed her steps, and soon there was only the crackle of dying embers. When dawn came, he found the twins asleep inside his house, curled up beneath his late wife's quilt. Their faces, peaceful in the morning light, looked like forgiveness itself. Elias stood in the doorway, staring out at the horizon. He could still see the faint trail where she'd ridden away, alone again into the vast, unfeeling plain. He didn't know if she'd return. But for the first time in years, the air inside the house felt alive, and when he whispered her name, it didn't echo anymore. It answered back in the sound of 2 children breathing softly in their mother's place. By noon the next day, the whole town knew she was alive. Word spread like tumbleweed in wind, rolling through saloons, across the blacksmith's yard, all the way to Nora Finch's porch where she leaned on the rail, whispering to a customer. They say Clara McGraw's back from the grave, with his girls in tow. Some called it a miracle. Others called it a lie born of grief. Sheriff Tom Dillard just spat his tobacco and said, Truth don't need arguing. It shows up when it's ready. At the ranch, Elias worked as though nothing had changed. But everything had. The twins followed him everywhere, feeding chickens, sweeping the porch, asking about every creak and rattle of the old house that was now theirs. He listened more than he spoke, sometimes smiling when he thought no one saw. Still, each sunset, his gaze drifted toward the horizon, waiting, hoping, and one morning, she came. Clara appeared at the gate on horseback, wearing a clean dress borrowed from Nora, her hair brushed, her shawl tied neat. The wind lifted dust around her boots as she dismounted. Behind her, a small crowd lingered, curious townsfolk drawn by whispers. Elias stepped off the porch, hat in hand. The air between them trembled. You all want a show? He said to the crowd, his voice steady but soft. Then watch what forgiveness looks like. He crossed the yard, his boots slow and certain, and reached for her hand. Her fingers hesitated, thin, trembling, but he didn't let go. You never died, Clara, he said, his voice breaking only once. You just wandered too far from home. She covered her mouth, tears slipping through her fingers. Then, without another word, he led her up the porch steps and through the door, closing it behind them. The town went quiet. Then Nora Finch whispered, Well, I'll be... And the crowd scattered, leaving the ranch in peace. Inside, the house felt smaller, warmer. Elias poured her coffee in the same cup she'd once used, the rim chipped just so. She held it close, breathing in the steam as if it were a memory. I didn't mean to stay gone, she said quietly. I couldn't face you like that. Broken, scarred, ashamed. He sat across from her, elbows on the table. You think scars make you less? Out here, scars are proof we survived. The lamp flickered between them. In that trembling light, two people who had once been husband and wife became something fragile but new, no longer bound by the past, yet not free of it either. That night, after the twins fell asleep, Elias walked to the barn and found Clara there, weeping into her hands. He didn't speak, just stood beside her until the sobs softened. "I ain't the woman you buried," she whispered finally. "Good," he said with a faint smile. "That woman's gone. I like this one better. She came back." Her laughter came through her tears, quiet and cracked, but real. For the first time in years, they stood close enough to hear each other breathe. Days passed like that, gentle, uncertain. Clara mended shirts and hummed while she worked. Elias fixed the old rocking chair and painted the porch white again. The twins played by the creek, calling their parents to see every tadpole, every cloud that looked like a horse. But peace on the frontier never lasted long. One evening, Sheriff Dillard rode up, his face grave. "Eli, you best listen. Those wagon men who took Clara in after the flood, they've been stirring trouble. Say she owes them. Say they want what's theirs." Elias's jaw tightened. "What do they think she owes?" "Years of labor, they claim. They call her a runaway." Elias glanced toward the house where Clara's laughter drifted out the open window. "Let them come," he said quietly. "This time they'll find me waiting," and come they did. At dawn, the sound of horses broke across the valley. 6 men rode hard toward the ranch, dust rising behind them like smoke. The twins were inside, peeking through the curtains. Their mother standing firm by the door. Elias stepped into the yard with his rifle slung low but ready. "She owes us," the leader snarled, spitting into the dirt. "We kept her alive. We fed her. She works for us till the debt's done." Elias didn't raise his gun. He just looked at them with that stillness the plains give to men who've known too much loss. "You want payment?" he said quietly. "Then take it in this, her piece. That's all she's got left." The men laughed, spreading out. "We'll take her back, old man." Elias's voice didn't rise. "Over my dead body." The leader's smirk faltered when he saw the glint in Elias's eyes. Behind him, Clara pushed the twins away from the window. "Stay back," she whispered, her voice trembling. Then came the first gunshot. The crack split the morning wide open. Horses reared, dust swirled. Elias moved with the quiet certainty of a man defending not land, but life itself. The sheriff arrived moments later, leading a posse from town. The fight was short, fierce. 1 man fell. The rest fled into the canyon's mouth, swallowed by their own cowardice. When the smoke cleared, Elias dropped his rifle and sank to his knees. Clara ran to him, hands shaking, eyes wide with fear. "You could have died," she cried. He smiled faintly, blood trickling from a scrape on his brow. "Then I'd have gone where you once were lost." She pressed her forehead to his, sobbing softly. Around them, the sun climbed higher, washing the world in gold. That night, they sat by the fire. No words, just the sound of the twins' laughter upstairs and the low hum of crickets beyond the door. Clara reached across the table, placing her hand over his. "Do you forgive me?" she asked, voice no louder than a breath. Elias looked at her for a long moment, eyes wet, tired, kind. "There was never anything to forgive," he said. "You were the only thing that ever made this land worth living for." She smiled then, small, trembling, radiant. The flames painted her face in amber light. Outside, the lilac wind returned, carrying the faint scent of rain and the promise of another spring. Later, when the twins had fallen asleep, Elias stepped out onto the porch. The plains stretched endless beneath a full moon, silver as memory. He felt her hand slip into his, warm and sure. "Feels like home again," she said. He nodded. "It always was." "Just took you to remind me." They stood in silence, the kind that doesn't hurt anymore, the kind that feels earned. And when a distant coyote cried from the ridge, Clara leaned her head on his shoulder, whispering, "Guess love don't die easy out here." He smiled into the dark. "No, ma'am. It don't die at all.